Aloha and welcome back to this episode of the Ohana Packers Edition podcast, the podcast where two dudes from halfway around the world talk everything green and gold, and everything is bad right now, Joe. The Packers drop another dud, something that we're not surprised by based on our projection podcast, our opponent scouting podcast from Thursday, but disappointing nonetheless. Do you have any other one-word description other than disappointing, Joe, for today's game? Or Sunday's game, I should say.
Dreadful.
Don't have to start with a D.
Duty. No, I really don't. There's not much that can be said about it. Like you said, we kind of have touched on this over the season so far, and it just, I don't want to make this sound bad, but guys like you and me and all the other most of the other content creators and a lot of other people realized that this wasn't going to be like a Super Bowl winning year. We had our high hopes, but we also knew deep down that this was just, when you've got your GM coming out and saying, well, we're just going to roll with the guys that we have, whether, they have experience or not, you knew it wasn't going to be like this amazing season. It would have to be like an Angels in the outfield type season, the situation for this season to have ended in a great way. But it's disappointing too, because we're not used to it. But you just got to roll with the punches. I mean, we're going to get into a lot of it in a bit, but like we've said for a while, you can't just blame one or two people. It's a group thing, from the coaches down to the players. You can throw Goody in there too, because Goody isn't, he's supposed to be building the rosters with the help of the coaches. And right now, I do have to agree with some of them. Like I caught Zach Tom's. I didn't watch it, but I saw some of the quotes out of his media scrum, and he pretty much said it. They have a talented group. They just need to put it together. It's not. It's not a.
It's not like the Bears roster from last year where you kind of question, like, is that an NFL roster or not? Like you said, there is tangible, legitimate talent on this roster. And like Tom said, especially with how much inexperience they have, starting, Love being in still just a second hand's worth of career starts, you can't continue to shoot yourself in the foot. And like you pointed out, it's not the frustrating part. I think the most frustrating part for fans is that there is no one thing that you can point to and say that's the issue. It's just a cascade of failures that continues to slap Green Bay in the face, and they always come up dazed. They don't know which way. They don't know who slapped them, kind of thing. They're just kind of staring around like, oh my God, where's the next one coming from? Instead of, I'm going to throw my own punch to counteract it. It's like they're being way too reactive on every front, and it's leading to just bad football overall. So yeah, like you said, we're gonna get into it. We'll start where we always do. I was trying to
find the quote. I had saved it, but now I can't find it. But yeah, and that's what I mean is we knew the situation, we knew what was going to go on, but we could never point at the talent and say, well, other than a select few like positions like safety, we all had questions about, and maybe the defensive line, but everywhere else we were like, can you name me one of them that's not hyper talented? I mean, everybody from top down has something to them. And yeah, it's not like the Bears where you have to question whether they're in an NFL caliber team or not, or Michigan could probably come in and whip these guys' ass. Well, no, there's always the possibility that one of these Sundays it all clicks for these guys and it just, they go on a tear. But right now, it just hasn't happened, and it's not just one person's fault. It's everybody's fault.
Yeah. And I think that's where a lot of, the Debbie Downers and stuff is, there's a lot of people making those statements that the Packers would lose to a, blank college team. And they wouldn't. They've been disappointing bad, but they're not that bad. They're not like 2008 Lions bad or 1976 Bucks bad, or 1976 Bucks bad. Here's Tom's quote: "We have the talent, we have the pieces we need. We've shown every game this year we can move the ball. It's just about doing it consistently, and we're not doing that. We're putting our defense in tough positions. It's just about coming out ready to play, and I don't know if we're always ready to play. Obviously, it's showing up. We're not ready to play." And I know there's a lot of ways to spin that, look at that, shine a light on it, but I think Tom is speaking more matter of factly in terms of whether they're obviously preparing during the week, they're installing some kind of game plan, and it's not that it's not the they're not their head's not in the game and they're not trying. It's just that, like we've pointed to, there's just a guy on every play that's screwing up, and it's torpedoing. It's death by 1,000 paper cut. They're 1,000 paper cutting themselves to death on offense. And then by the time that they get their, whether it's fully or even just partly so they look like they have a pulse, by the time they start to figure it out, they're down 14, 10, whatever kind of thing. And it creates a situation where even when it looks like it's quote unquote going good, it's like pulling teeth to get the ball down the field for this offense. And so like I said it during last week's game against Denver, once they got that holding call on the final drive, I had fully reserved myself to, that's it, they're done. Like it was just a matter of how they were going to not be able to convert second and 20 or whatever the hell it was. So it's frustrating. And like I said, we'll get into that, especially when we talk about the offense here in a second. But yeah, it leads to a lot of, well, now what from fans, because like I said, it's the most discouraging to not be able to say it's just the O-line that sucks, or it's just because Green Bay can't run the ball. It's because they're not blocking, can't run the ball, can't catch the ball, and when guys are open, Love isn't throwing the best passes to him. So when and that's only 4, and I know there's more issues than that, but it's one of those, okay, which one of those 4 is it going to be on a given play kind of thing. So that's what makes it such a headache for fans. And, everyone says like, oh, they're not trying. Trust me, those guys, the coaches, they're not just sitting there going, well, I'm making $8 million. I'll just throw my feet up. I can handle the public humiliation. They're trying. And I know that everyone gets sick of LaFleur's same repeated speech and stuff, but he can't go into the press conference. This isn't 1960 when Lombardi coached, where he could go in and just say, my players are all idiots and they don't know what we're doing. They suck. I know what I'm doing. You can't do that anymore.
And I've got to thinking, I wish they would just stop the media, the press conferences, because like you said, there's not going to be a coach that's going to come out and say something like that. You're just going to get coach speak every single time. Yeah. I'm willing to bet you if you were to go through every single one of the press conferences Matt LaFleur has had, he said the same thing every single time. Outside of 1 or 2 things, like maybe, okay, well, this guy went down with injury, or, something like that. But everything else has basically been the same thing. Execution. We're just not, we're not getting there. We're just not all on the same page. We're, what's the other big one that he likes to say? Well, specifically about like Aaron Jones, well, we just got to do better to get him more touches and stuff like that. So I just wish they would do away. I understand why they have the press conferences. It's so the media can get, answers. But really at this point, with the way AI is, you could probably just put in Matt LaFleur quotes and it would spit out a whole press conference for you, because that's all you're going to get is just the same basic canned answers week in, week out.
Yeah. And we can go on about this in a million different ways, but everyone wants to hear it. Like you said, he can't do that. we'd love to be a fly on the wall in the meeting room, in the locker room after a game like that. But they're never gonna, you can't do that in this era where guys are making as much money as they are and all the different factors that go into it. It'll go back to, well, what's LaFleur done? Who is he to talk to? So yeah, like I said, we could go down a million different rabbit holes on that front, but instead, let's pick apart what was.
Before we get to the offense, I have to say this, and no, I mean, we're going to shift the boat completely on this one. Now, I know friend of the show, Jason Perone, kind of answered me on Twitter, but do you know if they had any practice squad call-ups this week?
I don't think they did.
Well, if they didn't, then that's 2 weeks in a row they didn't use their practice squad call-ups. So
yeah,
what? Well, I mean, like we kind of talked last week. Well, if Devontae Wyatt's kind of ailing, which he went out and played, so maybe it's nothing major, then why not bring a guy like Jonathan Ford up? Or Jair's out there playing, but he's kind of banged up. You could have brought up somebody. Or safety wise, you have Benny Sapp the third out there at safety that you could have brought up because you don't have Darnell Savage. So if you've got them, why not use them? I mean, I can understand if it was everybody on your practice squad was down to their last call up and you're just like, no, I'm not going to do it. But they're not. The only couple of guys that have used all their call ups,
they're not on the roster anymore.
The ones
or they're not on the practice squad anymore, I should say.
Right.
Yeah.
The ones on the active roster, the other one's not even with the Packers anymore. So what's the difference? Why are we not using this one simple thing? Because what would have happened if AJ Dillon's injury was more than what it was? If he wouldn't have been able to come back in? Then you got Aaron Jones, who you don't like using anyway for some odd reason. And then you got Emmanuel Wilson, who you're not using for some reason. What are you going to do? Just run Sean Clifford out there and run the 2 quarterback set?
Apparently, it's just going to be quarterback draw with Jordan Love. That appears to be the method of the madness here at this point. But I don't have a good answer for that. I don't know what to tell you there.
And I don't know if anybody's been asking him in the press conferences. Maybe I should send a DM over to old Wes Hodkowitz and say, "Hey, can you ask this at the next press conference?"
Yeah, I don't have a good. I gotta look too at the I gotta double check the roster rules. I don't remember if calling up those 2 guys means, because I know that you're supposed to like add up to a certain number of guys on game. It's like the 48, the 46 or 48, whatever they're at now. They have so many different funky rules with inactives and stuff that they've messed up the numbers. But I don't think it is, but I can't remember if you need to deactivate more regular roster guys to allow for the call-up guys. I don't think that's what it was, but I got to double check that later.
So. I think that 2 guys are just in like emergency. Hello, Mario. No, now I could be wrong. That would be something I'd have to look into, but I don't think it counts for it.
That's the only thing I could think of, but I don't feel like they had like 10 guys on the inactive list the first couple of weeks when they were calling up 2 guys every week kind of thing. So right. I'll dig into that and I'll have an answer for Thursday's show. But yeah, just going into what afflicted the team today, it was, like we said, it was more of the same. And you've heard it, like you said, a lot of different outlets, pods, whatever, social media groups, what they've all talked about it, but the Packers have no good identity on offense. Their only identity is being mistake ridden, which is not what you want to be at any point in any terms of professional sports, much less the NFL, because as much of any of the professional sports, the NFL is probably the most dependent on all 11 guys playing well. Like MLB, if your pitcher is just raking, or if your pitcher is just dealing, the other team is going to get no hit. If you have a hot goalie in the NHL and they're just standing on their head the whole game, it doesn't matter who's on the other team. basketball, you can have LeBron and he just tilts the floor. Even at his age, he tilts the floor for you. The NFL, like you can have a perfect
Wait a
play
minute,
from
there's
10
other
guys.
sports than football?
You can have 10 guys doing the right thing, and that 11th guy is just going to be it always the ball, the defense always finds the guy who's screwing it up. That's just the nature of this sport, and it's happening in droves for the Packers, whether it's penalties, missed assignments, drops, off-target throws. This team, kind of went over it lightly earlier, but this team just can't get out of its own way. And, just to, between Love and LaFleur, everyone wants everyone wants a bad guy. Everyone wants an easy bad guy to point to and say, that's the thing. And that's the thing that when we fix that, we'll be fine after it. And the truth of the matter is there's no singular thing for this offense. There is no quick fix. If you haven't figured that out after 7 games, and yes, I'm including the first 3, you're never going to be, I don't want to say okay, but you're not going to make it through this season as a fan if you can't understand that what's afflicting this Packers offense is the whole offense right now. And Joe, like, we can go in circles about this, but it just makes it hard to watch because, like I said, nothing comes easy for this offense. Everything is pulling teeth.
Well, and I have to say, even today's game wasn't on Love. Love was actually making the plays that he needed to make. He just, the wide receivers weren't making the plays. Now, I am kind of like some other people where I'm a little miffed at the early on play calling because all it was screen this, screen that, flat this, flat that, and there was no real. I don't want to say chunk yards because I don't want to see him going 20, 40 yards deep every play, but it seemed like every other play they were running
everything is condensed towards the line of scrimmage. There's nothing to threaten the defense. Yeah.
So, but other than that, I mean, when he was throwing, it seemed like other than a couple early on, I think the one to Aaron Jones in the flat was a little bit of a, probably it could have went either way, whether it was a Jones drop or, Jordan just put the ball in the wrong place, or what was the other one that was kind of similar that, it could have went either way, that it was a drop or, Jordan just hit the wrong shoulder or whatever. But other than that, he had good ball placement. I know you have it on your list here that the one interception that he threw, Jaden Reed should have came up with it. It should have never came out of his hands.
I know a lot of people are saying he underthrew it a little. He probably wants it a yard out. But if you look at it, the outside corner is screaming over the top of that route, and the other safety is coming over the top too. So if he overthrows it, that ball's getting picked off anyway, or Reed is getting taken off the field on a stretcher. So it's another in a long string of, okay, everyone says like Love isn't giving his guys opportunities. That's not true at all. That means you either aren't watching or you have a vendetta one way or the other. He's definitely missed opportunities, and like you said, whether it's just being slightly off, he had they weren't back-to-back throws necessarily, but he had the ones where he just led Dobbs a little too far down the near sideline after he bought like 4 seconds in the pocket, and then he tried to hit the turkey hole shot to Watson where it was just off Watson's fingertips. And yeah, we need Love to start to put more of those on him, but I mean, the first time they failed inside the 10-yard line, it's hard to come back from your dude dropping a slant that's right in his chest. And it's not just Wicks. Everyone, like you pointed to the Aaron Jones one. I do grade those kind of misses hard because the way I have it in my rule book is when you're throwing to a running back, you got to put it on his numbers. Don't make him stretch. Don't make him turn. But at the same time, Jones gets 2 hands on that. You got to come down with it. The very next play, he puts it right on Musgrave. The DB doesn't get a hand on the ball, and Musgrave flat drops it. And it's like, it's shades of the end of the Raiders game where everyone only looks at the interception Love threw to end it, but Dobbs and Musgrave both dropped gimmies that would have converted for a first down. So, you know, too many people are spinning it the way they want it to look in terms of, well, he didn't come up, he didn't come through for his team. And like I said, I'll be the first to say that, yeah, I wish he was better all the time. And there's definitely things he could do better on his end. But far too often, he is actually delivering catchable balls and his guys aren't coming up with it. And
well, I hate to make it sound like this, but if they were more veteran players, we'd be looking at a different quarterback right now, because he would be racking up 300 yards a game and, 2 or 3 touchdowns, because they're savvy enough to, be able to run a route a little bit better, or, you know, get off the defender quicker, or whatever it is. So that's where the youth of the situation kind of hurts, is because and they're not going to get the play calls, or I mean the penalty calls. We all know that if you're more of a veteran, you're going to get the call
benefit
more
of the
than if
doubt.
you're.
Yeah.
And speaking of, was it just me, or did it seem like the referees wanted to be seen on TV more today than most other days?
Hakuili, the younger's crew, I've always thought his crew has been both flag happy and not understanding the rules very well. But there were some that were head scratchers, and other time, for the most part though, I'm always going to be more critical on just there were far more plays where guys didn't come up with the ball kind of thing than I could say that bad calls turned the game against Green Bay and stuff like that. But there were a lot of head scratchers in today's game, and it was pretty apparent that no one had a grasp on what contact was going to be allowed, what contact wasn't going to be allowed. It was a very guys were trying to feel out the game, and they had no idea how hot the burner was. They were tapping it and they're like, is it on? Has it been on for a few hours? And
Well, I'm
yeah,
not even saying that, they were calling against Green Bay or anything. It seemed like every other play, all we saw were refs doing this or refs doing that, or it's
yeah,
just like, wow. I mean, if you want a TV show, then go get a friggin' TV show, but you know, take it easy there, buddy.
yeah. So, but getting back to what Green Bay can or can't control, yeah, and like I said, I will try to. I don't have the awesome connections that a lot of other guys like Andy Herman and all who have the all 22 already. I'm one of those people who's just waiting for the NFL to release it a couple days after the game. But the thing I do want to look at is, some people were questioning if Love is abandoning his progressions. It's hard to say at this point because I don't have I'm not at the game. All I have is the broadcast angle to go off of, and I don't have the coach's film, so I can't say like how bad of some people were saying on one of the first long third and long chances he totally turned down Wicks and stuff like that. And those are the kind of plays where I'm at the point that Jordan, just throw it, and if you get picked off because the ball goes through your receiver's hands, I'm gonna live with that, because I need to see that you're gonna go through reads and just deliver the ball, and just trust that your coaches can make a proper distinction between that's a bad throw and someone just didn't hold up their end of the bargain. So
I still think that he's overthinking too much. Where and I hate to use this analogy, but he's trying to play chess when he needs to play checkers.
Oh no, that's a
And
good analogy.
Because okay, well, maybe he saw the Wicks thing and he didn't shake him off because of, this, but he thought too far ahead. Well, if I leave this out there, then this guy's going to cross over and this guy's going to hit this. You know what I mean? Where instead of playing the checkers and making that throw, he's thinking 3 moves ahead when he needs to just think of that one move.
Yeah, no, that's totally fair. And it's one of those things where it's, everyone's like, how much of it is on love? And I don't know how to break that, because everyone, like I said, anyone with an agenda either way is going to try and shape it more, they're going to hedge it more one way or the other. My whole thing is, he has a chunk of it. He can definitely play better. There's always little smidges of ball placement. I'm sure there's some decision making where he could be better. Like one of them that everyone kind of pointed at was the drive where he ended up hitting Dobbs for the touchdown. The second down play in there, it's like, oh, okay, that one he should have handed it off to Dylan because the O line actually blocked it. But that's one of those plays where I gotta go look back, and it's like, well, he's not looking at the whole O line. He's looking at one guy, and if his one read is, if he read the one read correct, I can't blame him for pulling the ball and trying to throw it. But if that guy crashed or if that guy stared him in the face, it's like, okay, Jordan, you got to just hand it off, kind of thing. As much as I know he's hearing that there's a lot of the fan base that's saying like he's not making enough game-changing plays, and he hasn't come through in the clutch, and he's not, all those kind of things. I know that, no matter how cool he's playing it, he's seeing and hearing those things. You just can't not be hearing those kind of things. So, but he just has to, those are the kind of things, like I said, I'm grading him hardest on, is make the correct pre-snap, read your coverage leverage pre-snap. When you snap the ball, if you have, two options, the play in Denver last week where it was like, throw the screen to Jones or throw the quick fade to Dobbs. It's like, okay, like you got to make sure you hit Jones when the screen is actually set up, kind of thing. So those are the decision making parts of it. And then, the ball placement stuff, it comes and goes, and it's the I don't even know what description to put on it, but it's like weeks 1 through 3 and the preseason, they were it was a back burner concern. It was something we wanted to see done better, but everything else looked so good on offense that it was like, oh, there's just some meat left on the bones. But because everything seems to be working, we're okay with it, and he'll grow with it as the young guys come through and stuff. But when everything else is just going to hell around him, then it's like, oh, so the O-line's not blocking on this play, they can't run the ball on that play, wide receivers are jumping balls all over the place, and the 2 or 3 times you do have an open target, you're just throwing that ball to Sarasota. So it's like it's magnified because of the surrounding situation. Like I said, those plays that it's like, oh, it would be great if he pushed that ball a foot more to the outside because Reed would have had a completion, kind of thing, in week 1. But now it's like, oh my God, he sucks. He can't throw the ball to the right guy. And it's like, a lot of the framework is based on, the situation and how the team is going. When the sky is falling, everyone sucks and everyone needs to be cut or traded. And when it's going at least decently good, it's like, oh, like we'll get him next time, kind of thing. So it's gonna come with the flow of it, and it just makes it more frustrating because, like I said, everyone wants a scapegoat, everyone wants a quick fix. There are neither for this offense. Everything is a struggle right now. And as much as everyone wants to find out now whether Love sucks or is the answer, it's impossible to answer that right now. It's like we said, last week's shows, my article, it's not looking good right now, but you can't make a final, it's not dead on delivery yet. It's still to be determined, but it ain't looking good right now.
It right now it's not, but I mean, like I said, he still looked better this game than he had a couple other games. I mean, at least he was making the proper reads for the most part. He was making the proper throws. He just couldn't get help out of anybody to. I even have to say that his protection was even a little bit better outside of a few things. I know they finally went to Yosh over uh, uh, Walker there for a bit, but then Walker came back. I don't know if Yosh went down with an injury again or tweaked something, but I know they brought Walker back in, and it still seemed like he was getting protection. There were even times that he was holding the ball too long. And whether that's because his guys weren't getting open whatever. But that's when he needs to go, okay, nobody's getting open. I'm just going to go for it. Just run. Just run. Get out of there. Don't take the sack. Don't throw an interception. Just run. Because he's got the ability to do that. It kind
Yeah.
of came too late when he decided to try running for the 4th and 16 and got 15 out of the 16 yards. But, you know, if you can do it, it's not like a Justin Fields where that's all he can do.
Right.
We know Jordan has an arm. We know he's got the ability to do it, but he's also got the ability to run. So if you can do it without having to sacrifice anything, then go for it. But I'm not expecting him to run, 100 times a game and get
Right.
500 yards on with his feet. So I think some of the times that he was in the pocket forever and nobody was getting open, maybe he should have rolled out, did the Rodgers roll out and just take off.
Or honestly, earlier in the game, I know it's not good football necessarily, and I don't want it to be a habit, but honestly, if they're not doing anything, he should just take off on like if they go 3 and out the first drive, they need anything to spark them, and it's like Jordan, just go get yourself 5 yards because as long as you hold on to the ball, we're getting positive. Yeah,
ignore the ones coming in and say, "Hey, this is what we're gonna do." It's going to get you in trouble, but eventually LaFleur's going to have to look at it and say, well, he's actually doing something right. Let's, let him go with it.
Yeah, it's rough. And from the LaFleur angle, I know he's a smart guy. People are saying like he's a dud, he's dumb, and so, there's a lot of factors at work here that are out of there's some that are in LaFleur's control. The things that are in his control that I think are torpedoing him now is he, like his predecessor in McCarthy, has this inability to put loyalty aside. And I don't even want to say it's for his own personal benefit, but he's kept guys around who probably don't deserve to be kept around. And I'm just talking about from a coaching standpoint. And obviously, the elephant in the room is Barry and stuff. But, whether it's like we've talked about, whether it's telling Stenovich, hey, you're still the offensive coordinator, but get your ass back in the O-line room because it's been a tire fire for over a year and I need you back over there kind of thing. And, there's structure and there's all these words that he uses, we have a system and blah, blah, blah. And I know that he has a contract extension, and so his seat isn't necessarily on fire this year unless he totally loses the locker room. But he's got to make changes. And I agree with people like our buddy Jacob Westendorf that overall firing Barry doesn't do you any good necessarily in season. But the thing that I look at it as is, okay, it sends the signal at least that we're not okay with the same thing over and over again. And the way that I tie it back into his offense is it's like, okay, like, he's been loyal at some point, whether it's Stenovich or he's the head coach and the Myers at center thing, I spent this offseason stumping for that. I thought Myers could have a good season. I don't think it's happening, dude. Like,
and then Stenovich to come out and say he's playing the best football of his life.
And
oh my
I don't
God.
think he's lying, but it's one of those, okay, but what are you comparing it to, right? Like, so it just paints this weird picture and, wanting to keep rotating, just hockey line changing his receivers and stuff like that. The fact that Samori Toure still gets the snap share that he does at this point of the season, things like that. It's you gotta start. I don't want to say even rewarding, but you gotta start picking out who your guys are that are your playmakers, and they need to start getting more snaps. That's all there is really.
Yeah, but that's even hard to do because look how many of them get hurt. I mean, you would want Christian Watson out there getting more snaps, but one, he's not been looking good, and two, he's been hurt for most of the season. You want Romeo to get more, but look at the first part of the season. He was hurt. Wicks, same way. You want him to get in there more, but then he gets these ticky-tacky injuries and he misses, this or that. Jaden Reed, same way. Luke Musgrave, same way. It's hard to have a constant rotation and give these guys more opportunities when you got to quote unquote put them on snap counts, because this one's got a hamstring, this one's got a foot, this one's got an ankle. So, not to give them excuses, because I get what you're saying. Some guys need to have their snap counts cut and some guys need to have theirs bumped, but you also got to go off who's reliable. And as much as people are piling on Samori Toure, he's been reliable because he's
Healthy.
able to.
Yeah, he's been available. Yeah. So I know. Yeah, like I said, there are no easy answers. There's no cheat sheet for this test. But my big point that I have in my notes here is, like I said, the most frustrating part from my point of view as a fan of this team is what has gotten better from the start of the season, or even just from the Detroit game. And I can't say they've gotten better at anything other than becoming more discombobulated and inconsistent of a team. And that's my whole thing is LaFleur just needs to pick something and make that the thing that he's like, okay, I obviously can't fix all of these tire fires that are going on around my offense at once. It's not feasible. Like, unless everyone goes to sleep one day and turns the proverbial light on overnight, they're not going to fix all their issues at once. So and like I said, the one I point to is get Stenovich, supposedly one of the best O-line coaches in the league, and that's why you promoted him to keep him in Green Bay. But you tell him, dude, go help your former assistant coach. Whatever is going on over there ain't cutting it. And it's, for all intents and purposes, if whoever 5 guys we do start, if they don't get their shit together, they're getting us all fired. Like, that's the simplest way of putting it, is like, your O-line, and everyone's gonna say it was the run game. That was on the back of a veteran O-line that was supposed to be rock solid in pass protection and at least reliable in run blocking. And it's like, between LaFleur being this offensive genius, which I do still think he is, and Stenovich being a damn good O-line coach, I think the results bear that out. The two of them have to figure out what the hell is going on with that room. And that's the one where I think that's the place to plant his flag and figure out what do we, whether it's moving Tom into center, putting Yosh at right tackle, if it's, starting running into Goot's office and telling him, I need a run blocking right guard, whatever it is, like, they've got to do something on the move and I think O-line is the one that they have to do.
Here's an idea I kind of floated last episode. Okay, so Josh Myers is quote unquote playing the best football in his life, whatever, or one of the best, whatever it was, the actual steno quote. Okay, well, if you don't think John Runyon is, then okay, move Tom to center, move Myers to right guard, where he can quote unquote continue playing the best football of his life, but he's not making the line calls. Then you could put Yosh or Walker at whichever tackle position you want. You still got your best player, your player playing the best football of his life on the field, but you've taken him out of a pressure situation and put somebody who looked like he could handle it.
Yeah, like I said, there are no easy answers.
But
at the same time, we know that rolling the same thing out ain't fixing it. So
no.
I'm honestly for trying anything.
Isn't that what they say? I'm
as much of a continuity as everything on O-line person, but continuity ain't shit with this group, in all honesty. So yeah, I'm for anything at this point. But to me, that's the thing with LaFleur that I want to see as a fan is because I think he's still calling some really good plays out there. You can't have guys who are running dead ass wide open on a play that Love is missing or is dropping a pass if it's not a good play call kind of thing. So I don't think he's broken necessarily. I think his offense is broken because of all the issues that have popped up, that, you know, somewhere because of, like you said, because of youth, because they don't have veteran, you know, their veterans are their 2 second-year wide receivers and their 4th-year fullback.
3 second-year wide receivers.
3 second-year, thanks. And the adults in the room on offense were supposed to be their O-line and their running backs who've been injured or ineffective all season. So, like I said, that's where I would like to see LaFleur put his stamp on this season and say, okay, at what are we in? Week 8 or week 9, we're gonna it's gonna be a monumental one, but we're making a change, and we're saying that we're gonna do something about this, and we're gonna try to make something happen with this O-line. And that's the big thing. Is I don't think, while I do think that part of this season is waiting for the young guys to catch on, you have to supplement that at some point when they're not catching on, because still this week you had plays where it looked like guys were in the wrong spot. You know, the first time they failed on 4th down in the red zone, Love is throwing that dig to Dobbs, but then you have Reed running like a little shallow in cut right underneath of him, and so the safety isn't put at any sort of he's not in distress in coverage. He's just like, oh, there's 2 guys that are within 5 yards of each other. I'll just hang around this play kind of thing and stuff. So again, it's the same kind of thing. I think
that's the one that I looked at and I said, I think he was shooting for Reed more than he was Dobbs. Because if you look at it, Reed cut it short, and I think Jordan was thinking he was going to continue the route, and it just ended up that Dobbs was in the same position.
Right. So those are all different things where it's like, like what do you do at this point? But like I said, they're up the creek, and at some point you just got to start paddling and just pick a direction, LaFleur, and start paddling with all you've got at this point. And, you know, I don't think he's losing the locker room or anything like that, but the way you do is, if you don't be the adult in the room, I keep using that term, but it's like, this team is, you know, it's averaging 25 years and change across the roster. Someone, you don't have those guys on the field. Bakhtiari's done. Your oldest linemen are like 28 or whatever, and you know they don't touch the ball. So it's someone has to take charge. It's LaFleur's offense. It's LaFleur's coaching structure, his system. Pick a direction, LaFleur, and start to paddle us out of it. So going from a side of the ball that needs a direction to one that I have no faith in ever finding a direction, the defense, it basically played out just like we expected it to. The only thing that kept the Vikings from getting 350 passing yards was Kirk Cousins' right Achilles blowing up into dust as they were about to go in for another touchdown. And okay, just going off on an aside there, I don't care that he played for the Vikings. You have to feel for Cousins there. That's just a bummer injury, and people trying to make out the whole like, oh, Vikings fans cheered when Rodgers broke his collarbone. I'm like, just get a grip, you guys. We suck. Just be adults about this kind of thing. Neither of these teams are going anywhere. And honestly, with how bad Green Bay has looked, we want Minnesota to win more so that they're not in the Caleb and Drake May sweepstakes at this point. And they picked up a big win today in that regard. But I mean, the most discouraging things is this game played out exactly as I expected it to on defense, with the added disappointment that Jaws back looks like it's a bigger issue than any, you know, even you and I were hoping it would be. I think they got to put Jaw on IR at this point. He looks like a guy, especially with what the weather was today, with snow flurries, slick field surface. He looked like a guy afraid to take a misstep because he knew that if he takes the wrong step, his back is flaring up and he's in the shitter again.
Well, in a way, but then every once in a while you would see him make a big play or something. You know, I go back and I tweeted about it during the or X'd about it during the game or whatever the hell Elon wants to call it this week. Where him and Addison were going back and forth, and after Addison made a big play, and then the next play, Jair like laid him out. There was no gain or whatever it was, or you dropped the ball or whatever. And I said, well, maybe this will finally put a fire under Jair. Well, then, he went back to playing soft, and then he made another play later on, and it just seemed like it was like one every 10 plays he was doing, he looked good, and then the other 9 plays he looked like shit. So
Yep.
I don't know if I mean, you could be right. I didn't pay much attention to how he was looking, when he was doing stuff, but you could be right where he was afraid that it was going to start flaring up or whatever, or who knows what's going on. So maybe a stint on IR, or maybe another couple weeks or whatever it is, but I don't. It's hard for me to say. Now, I'm
So
not going to say like a lot of them have been saying, well, ever since he's got his big contract, he's looked like shit. No, he's only started looking like shit this year when, the injuries started mounting up. Because if y'all remember right, last year he looked almost all pro again after missing a couple of games, and he's also the one that they put on Justin Jefferson in that last Minnesota game where
yeah,
Jefferson's had like what, 1 catch, 2 catches?
yeah, it's everyone wants to make his season last year look worse than it did because it paints this narrative that he doesn't give a crap after he signed his contract. I agree with you. I don't think that's the case. Last year he was inconsistent to start the season, but he came on with a flurry to close the season, and that fed into the whole: is it Barry? Is it Jerry Gray? Was it that whole feud? Is it still Barry this season? What is it, kind of thing. But I do think it's mostly the injury. The play to me that raised the most, because there were a lot of them, but like you said, it was when the play was like to him, Ja looked like he was there, but anytime he had to make a hard cut, like when Addison, a lot of his plays on Ja were off of like dig routes, hard 90-degree cuts where Ja is backpedaling and he's got to click it into he's got to click it into overdrive and go, kind of thing. Or the touchdown he gave up where it was on like a quick out and up kind of play. Ja doesn't even react to the out, but he can't click to close when Addison breaks it back upfield. And like I said, I'm not saying this to bag on him, but my whole thing is, it's bothering to me. Like, he just looks like a guy where he's in his stance and he can't get out of his stance. So he looks like a guy who can't get off the toilet seat. And it's like,
Been there.
We've both been there. So practicing, I don't think is doing him any good at this point. He just needs to get off his feet for a few weeks, like use the majority of the IR stint to just, like you said, whether it's acupuncture, heat treat, whatever the hell he needs to do, go do it. And just because like I said, everyone thinks that the wear and tear is from the hits and getting contact and all that kind of stuff. It's just the constant running. It's like I said, I don't know if it's a lower or an upper back injury, but the way he was or wasn't moving out there today, he just needs time off. And I know it's going to feed into the narrative that he doesn't care after his contract, and the team isn't good, so there's another high price guy that's not trying. I don't think that's the case with the guys on this team. I do think they because that's the thing is, like, people are saying Kenny Clark's under. Kenny Clark is young enough that he's going to get a third contract from somebody. He needs to perform to get that third contract. Same for Ja. Like, these are all guys that were drafted when they were like 21. So a third contract takes that's when they're 28, 29. So they're playing for something, whether team success is high on the goal is how good the team is, but they're playing to stay in this league one way or the other. So I don't buy into that talk. But
and then for people to say, well, Ja's getting traded, they got to trade Ja. It's not happening this year. If they're going to trade him, it'll be next year. The ramifications money wise this year are too steep.
Oh, no way. Yeah. There's no way they can.
No, I think I read that it would be negative cap savings if they were to trade him this year, or Monday, which is tomorrow. So it would be like they would save negative $20 million if they traded him tomorrow. Well, that doesn't help a young team. I don't think they could afford that right now.
Yeah, it's especially because they like renegotiated his deal and all that kind of stuff. It doesn't work out money wise. So yeah, like I wrote a different article. The 4 guys who could get traded, and those are guys that um would create cap space and would open up a chunk of change that is going to be used on, whether they're guys on the roster right now or guys that are going to be added in either free agency or the upcoming draft, whatever, so be it. But the guys who just signed extensions are not on that list in terms of, hypothetically, you could get the biggest you could get the biggest return, but realistic. Well, and that's the thing too, is like, if Ja's back is so bad that he could go on IR, what team is going to trade for him at this point?
Well, and I don't think they could. If he's got some kind of, isn't it? If he has some kind of injury designation, they can't trade him.
I don't know about designation, but it's the whole it's like the Brett Favre thing where the Packers, some Dr. McKenzie would probably tell you, I still think we should have failed him, and it was, Bob Harlan was the one who was like, or not Bob Harlan, it was Ron Wolf, who said, screw it, like, approve it. It just pushed the trade through. I don't care. I've got 4 good years out of him, kind of thing. And it's only if he's on IR that I don't think he could be, if you're on PUP or IR, I don't think you can be traded. But because he's on the active roster, it would just be a matter of, the return would probably be affected by the fact that he might miss time because of his back injury, kind of thing. So it gets into the semantics of that side. And then it's the whole, okay, what is enough to get back for Jair to make it make sense to move him now, kind of thing. So like I said, I don't think trading him makes sense. Just protect him from himself and continue to, just I mean, it's Barry's defense. Like I said, it went like I expected it to. Minnesota marched up and down the field. What was the stat that Jacob Morley was keeping track of? They converted like 8 third and 8 pluses or something like that on the day. And it goes back to the same stuff we've been talking about. There's no cohesiveness on this defense. The times that they're getting pressure, they're not getting home because the quarterback has somewhere to dump the ball off because the coverage is so loose. They had one where Cousins threw to like his fullback in the flat and the guy went and turned up and got a first down. And so it's like there's no defense to correct that based on what Barry's doing out there. And yeah, like that's why I know that we haven't spent too much time talking about the defense the last couple of weeks, because it was the whole, okay, like sure, they haven't allowed 20 plus points, but it's more because of who they were playing than anything they were doing on their own. So yeah,
it's getting to be the same thing. Well, and it's beginning to be the same thing with the offense. There's not much more we can say about it because until the coaches themselves decide to change something up, it's just been the same old story. Now, I do have to say that I think Barry's scheme today was like even worse than it has been, because all he wanted to do was play soft across the board. And, in a way, the run defense was a little bit better, but overall, it just was still soft across the board, and they weren't doing anything with it.
It's like we said, Barry, he's an old school defensive coordinator, and old school defensive coordinators have this historical trend of like they have a binky scheme and they don't turn away from it. And it's like, no matter who the opposition is, it's Kirk Cousins. Kirk Cousins will happily take checkdowns all day if he's gaining good yards on him. And he was like, I don't know what his his average depth of target was going to be on the day. I don't believe it was going to be more than like 6 yards, but they were all wide open. And like he had the one play where it was a repeat of week 1 from last season. Cousins was taking advantage of all the open space underneath the coverage. And then the few times that they called down the field throws, they were taking advantage of the fact that the Packers were in cover 4. And so they knew how to run coverage or route combinations that would create voids in that defense. And that was like some of those deep corner routes to Hawkinson and stuff like that. Like, it's just the same shit, different day. And like, okay, so, there's a lot of people who say like firing Barry doesn't change anything, all that kind of stuff. The one place I disagree with that is that you're right. It probably doesn't change how Green Bay plays this season because it's hard to totally scrap on either side of the ball. The one place it does matter is it means his ass is gone, and there's no dead. Like that was the thing with last year. Is I said it as they started to win games down the stretch last year. I was like, they're gonna either make the playoffs and be out in the wild card round, or they're gonna lose like late in the season when they don't have a good, like a, not a top 10, not a great draft pick. And in some regard, they're gonna say, it was good enough and just a little bit better play from the players on the team, and we'll be better. And like I said, that's where it circles back to LaFleur being loyal. And it's like, no, Westendorf was saying it on Pick 6 this week a lot. Good enough is not good enough. That has long been the attitude in Green Bay. You're willing to live with, potholes here and there on the path to, to greatness. And it's like, it's good enough because, the excuse was we have Rodgers. And this year it's kind of like, it's good enough because we're not expected to win anything. And I'm not saying they should have like gone with like a gung-ho coordinator like Flores who is going to blitz every down and play cover zero, but like I said, the benefit of firing Barry is nothing about the defense will play better. It's the fact that you guarantee Barry won't be back next year. That's an improvement on its own.
That, but it would also be in hopes that the interim coach, whoever would be the interim coach, is going to be playing, coaching for a job. He's going to be wanting to hope that, hey, if I do better than Joe Barry, maybe they'll just keep me as the full-time, coordinator. And so maybe it would help boost, but I don't know. I'm on the fence about it. I don't see it helping out in any way other than, like you just said, that it would guarantee he's not there. But I think at the end of the season, if Joe Barry is still retained, then we have to take a long, hard look at Matt LaFleur. And I don't want to say that because I do like LaFleur. I think unlike what some people are thinking, I think he is a good coach. I think he's just having a hard time right now with some of the guys around him. I think he's having a hard time getting people to buy in, which we've said for the last couple of years that, it seems like some of these players aren't wanting to buy in. And so I don't put it all on him, but like I said, if Joe Barry, if the inclination is that he's going to be retained, then I think Dan Kotnick said it earlier in their post game that then I think Goody has to take a long, hard look on whether or not he wants to keep LaFleur, because if they stay with the status quo, then that also puts Goody's ass on the line too.
Right. And and then it gets even to a higher level than that, then you get into the tinfoil hat of the whole, like, okay, I believe they're still under that structure where Murphy has, I don't want to say he has final say, but he had, him, LaFleur, and Goot are on, even playing field kind of thing. And they're, it's like the judicial, or it's like the, it's like the U.S. government system where it's the three checks and balances kind of thing and stuff where, like you said, the things that are at factor is, so the overarching one is Murphy's hitting mandatory retirement either
in a couple of years at least,
in 2025, like before the 2025. I know he's there for the draft in 25. That's in Green Bay, but I don't know if he's there for the season that follows that, or if he's done before, like he's like done the day he turns a certain age kind of thing, right? But so, right or wrong, he has a legacy, and he's an egotistical guy. He doesn't want his legacy to be, you brought the draft to Green Bay, but they had the first overall pick like 2 years in a row kind of thing. And then Gutekunst has to look at it as, who knows, the next CEO is probably also going to be a Packer person kind of thing and all that stuff. But still, his spot is not necessarily guaranteed. And so, like you said, like, it's a little tinfoil hatty, but at the same time, it's not hard to draw some dots that those two guys would be having, they would have questions for LaFleur if it's like, or it's a different conversation if they all agree, like, nah, Joe's the right guy. Like, and we won't even get into that conversation, because if all three of those agree that route, it's like, well, we're screwed. Like,
yeah.
So yeah, it's one of those that, like you said, it's gonna sound like we're saying the same thing every week, but as long as Barry's the coordinator, that's kind of how it is. Like, he's the same. He's gonna be the same chef. He ain't gonna change from one ethnic food group to a different one during the season. He's gonna be the same guy, and as long as that stays the same, there ain't gonna be any big changes on that side of the ball. But instead of just being down on everything this week, let's get to the one golden, the sunshiny unit on the team that almost gave it away with a missed field goal that was bailed out by, on replay, a damn obvious offside penalty on Minnesota, where not one, not two, but three Vikings were all lined up offside, and Anders reclaimed getting his name pronounced correctly. He drilled the field goal, and
I was so freaked out about that, because he clanked it, and like you said, it was obvious offside, so that was a good call. But my brain immediately went to, oh my God, he's going to overcompensate.
And he did pull it. He did pull it.
Oh, but
just just the way he was walking, like, you heard the ref, because both they were showing Carlson, and I'm assuming it was Whelan, that two of them were like walking with each other to the left, and you could hear the ref, and he's like, players remain on the field. The penalties on the defense kind of thing. And I'm like, oh God, look at him. He's shell-shocked. He doesn't know what to do right now. But I will give him his flowers. He came back and he hit that field goal, and but I know I thought the same thing. I knew like, I wasn't even thinking of what I was saying. I was like, oh, I know what Joe's thinking right now.
Well, it was, because I'm just like, oh my God, he's gonna overthink it. He's gonna overcompensate, and he's just gonna, instead of going right, it's gonna like clank left. And then when it went through, it's like, oh my God, thank you.
Yeah. So it's.
But I also have to say this. I'm kind of frustrated in some of the play decisions, kind of to go back for a little bit on the offense, but it kind of mixes in with the special teams here. There was a couple of times that I didn't understand why LaFleur just didn't go for the 3 points and went with the 4th and longs like he did. I understand they were so far down and they were hoping for this or hoping for that. But the way the defense was kind of, holding things down, the Vikings brought in the rookie quarterback and things like that. It didn't make sense to me that they didn't go for the points and trying
You're talking
to hold
about the 4th and 16 one, right?
Not just that one. It was also just right after Cousins got hurt and Jaron Hall came in, and I think that one was
the one Wicks dropped.
Yeah.
I was okay with that one because it was only 4th and 5. It wasn't long, but the 4th and 16 one, I know people would have groaned and stuff, but it's like, we saw it, and that's the thing too. You were pointing out, like, we don't want Love to just turn into Justin Fields and just bail every time. He did stay back there for a while, and you could see he drifted right. He drifted to his right because he was like, "Is anyone gonna do anything? Is anyone gonna do anything?" And then you kind of saw it where he was like, "Screw it! Like, I'm just gonna see what happens here," kind of thing and stuff. But yeah, it enters. I didn't care too much because it's sort of in that realm of, what do you got to lose kind of thing. You're probably not getting back. But I agree. 4th and 16 is long. It's a long down to try and convert.
Wicks dropped. It could have easily been At that point, it would have been 24-13. So you're still down by, 11 points. Well, then, okay, let's say the rest of the game plays out like it did. Well, then you have I believe it was, did they punt it? I think that was the punt. And Nixon had a decent return coming back. They drove down the field. Then that's when you got the 4th and 16. Okay, you try for the field goal again. Hopefully Anders makes it. Now you're at 24-16. So that means you just need a touchdown and a 2-point to tie it. And like I said, the defense is still holding out there. Hall's not doing anything. So you
I
still
couldn't
have a
believe they
chance to
had him
come back.
throw it as many times as they did. I thought Vilma was dead on in that sense. He's like, I mean, the strip sack that Preston got was coaching malpractice by the Vikings. I didn't understand what the hell O'Connell was doing at
Right.
that point.
But I mean, that just it kind of drove me wild. And not only that, at least you're putting points on the board so it looks better in the box score. You know, I know you don't coach like that, and you're always trying to coach for the win. But what looks better to the casual person going through the box scores, 24-10 or 24-16?
And it does, like, it's this weird thing where from like when you're on offense, even if like, as like I said, especially the 4th and 16 ones, there's not a lot of calls for 4th and 16 where it's like, yeah, you're at that point where it probably doesn't help us win the game, but it's good to get something. And yeah, I don't know if it plays out any different or anything like that, but there is something to, especially after you just got punched in the dick the drive before by coming up with nothing on 4th and 5 or whatever it was. It's like, yeah, you're kicking a sad field goal down 14, but it's like, like I said, yeah, it's points, and it's something to hang your hat on. Where as opposed to, yeah, we got gifted the ball and we didn't move it. We went backwards because of a penalty kind of thing and
Well,
stuff.
and that's
So
another thing, that at least gives a little bit of a boost saying, all right, well, at least we got something out of it. If you go into 4th and 16 and you try to run a play like they did and you get nothing, then you're kind of demoralized. Whereas if you go, okay, we drove a little bit and at least we got 3 out of it. Okay, we can come back, and they can start doing the math in their heads. All right, well, all we need to do is this. We just got to come back and do this. That kind of helps out a little bit more.
yeah, like we said, no easy answers, no cheat sheet for this test, but yeah, like I said, I don't have much to say for the defense because I don't have any faith in Barry changing anything. But on offense, I just need to see LaFleur put some sort of stake in the ground and say, this isn't going to solve all our problems, but we're going to start fixing this one damn thing. So,
Well, then I guess according to Jay Glazer, the Packers are still in the running back market. Great. But you also need to be in the offensive lineman market right
yes.
now.
Yeah. And that's the thing is like, you know, like I joked, it's like, oh my God, you just picked Michigan guys, but it's like, you don't need a flashy name at guard. You just need someone who's, solid. And like we said, this is going to be a discussion for draft offseason. I know that Mafi and I have talked about it a lot. Westendorf and I have talked about it a lot, but there's some philosophical changes that need to happen if LaFleur is going to be the long-term solution. But those are things.
I say
those are
just let it go and either take a quarterback or take Marvin Harrison Jr.
And yeah, we'll see where the cards lie on that one. But Joe, the hard part for us, who's your MVP this week?
I know this is going to surprise a lot, but I'm going to say Jordan Love, because to me, Jordan actually looked like a starting caliber, maybe not a top 5 quarterback, but a up and coming star. Yeah, it doesn't look like it in the stats. Yeah, it doesn't look like it all over the place. But if you saw, and I haven't, like Mike said earlier, we've never been over the all 22 yet because they haven't put it out for us yet. and I don't go through the all 22 anyway. I leave that up to Mike. But, from my eyes watching the game, if if you could transport him back into one of the years of Rodgers when he had Jordy, Devontae, Cobb, this game would have been lights out because that's the type of throws he was making. And that was the type of decisions he was making. Was if he had a more veteran team with more veteran presence, some of those passes, like I go back to the one with Dobbs that ended up being, it was called complete on the field, and then went back to being incomplete because Dobbs bobbled it. That's one of the many plays Jordy and Aaron Rodgers would do, where Jordy would toe touch the uh, the sideline, and he'd come down with it almost every time. So I just he had great ball placement today. He had some amazing throws. Yeah, a couple of them might have been out of place or whatever, but I don't think there's a quarterback in the world that's going to have perfect placement. Tell me the last time a quarterback has went a perfect, whatever, 25 and 25 in a game. So it doesn't happen because, they're human. So I'm going to go with him for my MVP just because I really liked what I saw out of him, even though the outcome didn't work out.
And I'm going to go on the other side of the ball. I'm going to give TJ Slayton his due. I thought he played a hell of a game today. That's the thing that it's hard to rate because, everyone's like, we expected a big year out of Slayton. You're not going to see it on the stat sheet from a nose tackle. Like, if you do, that's from, that's from a once in a generation player. That guy is there to eat blocks and, make the occasional stop for loss or stop for no gain kind of thing. But he's there to open up plays for other people. But Slayton, he made a couple plays. He had the one where he strung an outside toss play that Rashawn ended up securing the tackle on. He almost intercepted a couple inside screens. Yeah. So like, I thought it looked like it was one of those games where it looked like it was coming together for him as he was playing through the game. And I don't know if he's ever going to be a guy that plays like 40 snaps. It's hard when you're as big as he is. And I don't think the 330 is necessarily, he's not a sloppy 330 listed, but he's a big dude kind of thing. So, but I thought this was his best game as a pro. I just wanted to give him his shout out for what he did today. And
oh yeah, he looked great today. I really can't disagree with you on that. I think if my eyes didn't deceive me, they played him more at nose than they did Kenny. Kenny did get to play a little bit more on the outside than he normally gets to. So, and as we've said for the longest time, if that happens, I think the defense is going to do better. I think Kenny needs to stay away from the nose. Let Slayton take the nose position and just let him feast.
Yep, I agree. And getting more games like this out of Slayton is what gets you there. For LVP, I'm just gonna say it's the receivers today. I know that's a cop-out answer, but they, like I said, it's not an excuse for Love, but they've got to be better. That you don't have, you went from one of the most accurate quarterbacks in the history of, not just of his generation, in the history of the NFL. I know he wasn't as good as he was before, but Rodgers will go down as one of the most pinpoint accurate quarterbacks ever, to a guy that was, percentage wise, was never going to be that level. Like it just wasn't going to be that way. And you gotta make the plays that are there. Like I said, even the ones where I grade Love as a minus on it because I think the play to Jones in the flat and a couple other ones, but you gotta help out your quarterback. You got to, he can't hand you the ball 20 yards downfield or 5 yards into the flat or things like that. You're all paid professionals. Do your job. Make your quarterback look good. Make yourselves look good by making some, not necessarily highlight plays, but every play you make is an opportunity to become a highlight play. So it's, that's the thing. We've pointed at it for a couple weeks, and at some point the light is gonna we've seen it flicker on for all of these guys at some point. Each one of the, even Toure, who are a dog, has made a couple plays that have surprised me this season, but the light never stays on for these guys. It's always on for a play, off for a series, off for a play, on for the next series kind of thing and stuff. So it's got to start staying on for these guys, and until it does, they're in my LVP for this week.
I can't disagree. And matter of fact, I'm going to say the same thing. Wide receiver. There were numerous times that made me so mad that I just, like, one of the deep ones that it was a little bit overshot of Dobbs, but if Dobbs would have laid out, I think he would have made a spectacular catch along the sideline. And uh, again, I'm not going to blame him for a lot because, one, injuries. He hasn't looked like himself coming back, but he's also not fighting to get open. Wicks has looked all right for what he is, what he was drafted at the moment. I think he's got a ton of potential, but, he had his drops. So I'm going to go with the wide receivers too. And there's not much more I can compound onto what you said, but and what hurts even more is they supposedly had a players only meeting with the wide receivers where they went over the game film and all in a closed door meeting, and they still came out and played pretty crappy.
Yeah. Just not enough complimentary football. We hear Andy Herman say that all the time, but until this team starts doing it, they're not gonna win a game, and it's uphill. It's an uphill climb at this point. The easy part of their schedule is in the rearview mirror, and they blew a lot of those games, and now they're heading into the brutal section of their schedule at this point. So it might be a long November for the team, but you got to learn how to win, and if you're gonna do it, it would feel pretty satisfying if you figure that out during this month. But Joe, you got anything else for this one, or are you ready to put a bow on it for this week?
I'm ready to put a bow on it for the season anymore, but I'm to the point where I'm kind of dreading each and every game going forward because it's like, okay, how are they going to screw it up this time? But no, I there's not much more I can add. We've already tore it down as much as we could tear it down.
The honest progression I'm looking for is just make it look like you're not pulling teeth to move the ball 20 yards on offense. Like, that's honestly where I'm at this point in the season.
And it's the Rams next week, right?
Yep. So Rams next week, and then
it looks
Pittsburgh.
Like Stafford. Well, it looks like Stafford's hurt. I saw him taping. They were taping up his thumb, and then Kenny Pickett left. So we could be going against backups the next 2 weeks.
Oh, and our Green Bay tradition is so great against backup quarterbacks. But that's going to do it for this week's episode. We thank you for following us along this trying and troubling season from the Packers. Please give us a follow on social medias. On Twitter, I'm at Kawano Mike. Joe is at Iowa_Joe86. The podcast is at Ohana_Packers. Please check out the website. Joe's been doing a lot of good work trying to shuffle it around. ohanapackers.org. Got streams of you can hit links to get streams of our podcast, to get all of our blog posts. We're trying to get up to regular posting by both us and some guest writers that we're going to get integrated in the coming weeks. Please like and subscribe to the podcast on your favorite podcast apps. Please leave comments. We appreciate any kind of feedback we can get. It's another one. It's another dud of a game by the Packers, but this is the price in a rebuild. So it's onwards and hopefully upwards. But we say thank you and aloha.